Donald Trump surrounds himself with people who just tell him what he wants to hear. And the reason why he's able to go in front of the press and say, what a great success. The reason why he's able to do that is because he himself believes this. He lives in an alternate reality, a fantasy land. And that's why he's able to so convincingly tell the press and the American people that this was a great success, even though if you look at the evidence, this was a tremendous failure. And unfortunately, this will not change. And so the American people will continue to believe that this war is going well. And we know this because this is exactly what happened in Ukraine. For the past few years, Russia has been dominating the battlefield and has been killing many, many Ukrainians. It's been a disaster for Ukraine, but you don't know this if you're American, if you're an average American, because the news tell you that this war is going great. One more day, guys, and Putin will fall. One more day, the Russian economy will collapse, the Russian people will revolt, and Putin will be out of office. One more day, and Ukrainians will reach Moscow. Same situation here, where one more day, and Iran will surrender. One more day, the Iranian economy will collapse, the people will revolt, and then we'll have peace in the Middle East. So unfortunately, this is modern war where it's really about optics. But again, if you want to win this war, don't focus on optics because ultimately, you're the one fooling yourself. Okay, so the big news this weekend. The Americans said that one of their jets, called an F-15, this is about a $90 million plane, it was shot down over Iran, basically in this area. And 2 pilots were able to eject safely out of their plane. Now, it is the policy of the American military to leave no man behind. And this is the Americans are one of the few militaries to actually do this, where if you're behind enemy lines, they will try to rescue you. And they spent years training you on how to evade enemy captors. They'll spend a lot of resources trying to save you. The propaganda is that this is to show you how Americans really value human life. And it's something that Americans are very proud of. But another reason why the Americans do this is this optics, which is that the Americans believe that the military is invincible. And they spend a lot of money and resources in order to create this image. So if the Iranians are able to capture a pilot and have him appear on Iranian TV, this is a huge propaganda win for the Iranians. For the Americans, everything is optics. As I'll show you later on, this is going to be a huge issue in this war, okay, as this war progresses. Now, there are a lot of issues with the story that's being told to us, okay? So Americans said that they have successfully evacuated both pilots, they have saved both pilots. But the issue is this. The issue is that we know that the Americans created a makeshift landing strip, basically an airport, a small airport, 200 kilometers from where the airman actually was knocked down. So he had to hike a long way in order to get to the landing strip. Also, he was injured. So that was very, very hard to do. Also, he's trying to evade enemy capture. Okay, so this story doesn't really make sense. And why did the Americans decide to create a landing strip here rather than someplace closer? And why would you need 155 planes for this operation, right? Aren't you better off with just 1 or 2 to like avoid enemy fire? But it gets weirder, okay? It turns out that the Americans basically spent a lot of resources to save the pilot. It took 48 hours, and the CIA created a lot of distractions. And this led to the destruction of very expensive American planes. Now, the American story is that these planes were caught in the sand. They couldn't lift off. So Delta Force, the commandos who are trying to save the pilot, they blew up the planes themselves. And as you can see, the Americans in this operation, they lost a lot of expensive planes. The estimates are the Americans lost $300 million. And even though the Americans say that there were no casualties in this rescue, we can expect that there were casualties in this rescue because a lot of planes were destroyed, okay? And again, these are very expensive planes. So this has led people to question whether or not the narrative is true or not. You can make the argument that the American military prides itself on no man left behind, so they will do whatever they can, move heaven and earth to save that person. And that's something that the Americans take pride in. But again, there are issues with this narrative. So the first thing is, how did a American fighter jet get knocked down in Iran when the Americans have said that they have air supremacy over the country? Another issue is that the weapons systems officer is a colonel. A colonel is a very high-ranking individual in the American military. So why would he participate in this operation? And even though he was injured, seriously wounded, according to Trump, he still managed to hike up a 7,000-foot mountain ridgeline and hide in a crevice in the Zagros Mountains for 48 hours despite his wounds. Also, we don't know who he is. He was never interviewed by the press, which is unusual because if you rescue the man, you make him into a national TV star, right? So there are a lot of issues with this story. We don't understand why they had to build an airport. We don't understand how these planes got destroyed. And the fact that there are no casualties absolutely makes no sense whatsoever, okay? Maybe something else is going on. And people online are speculating that this was actually a failed ground invasion. And the mission was to sneak into Iran's nuclear power plant and steal Iran's enriched uranium, which it would need to build a nuclear weapon, okay? And by doing that, you deny the Iranians' capacity to build a nuclear weapon, and you can declare a victory, okay? 4 days ago, the Washington Post leaks a Pentagon plan to do exactly that. And it's a very detailed plan that involves hundreds or thousands of troops, and the idea is to build a landing strip near the power plant in order to land forces, in order to land equipment. So when this first came out, again, I didn't take it seriously because this is so retarded. Are you seriously gonna build an airport in the middle of Iran and hope the Iranians don't notice? And you're gonna land 1,000 troops in the middle of mountains where they're gonna rain missiles on you? It makes no sense whatsoever, okay? But unfortunately, if you just look at what happened this weekend, this is the plan they used, okay? But then the question is, wait a minute here. This is a top secret military plan. How did the Washington Post get this? Well, the answer is because we assume that some generals gave it to them. Peter Hegseth, the Secretary of War, fired the top generals for the military. And we don't know why. But we can suspect what happened was this. Donald Trump asked the generals to come up with a plan to steal the uranium. And the generals are like, let's come up with this stupid, insane plan that there's no way this guy would agree to, and then we'll forget about it. And Donald Trump's like, this is a brilliant plan. This is a great movie. Let's do this, guys. The generals are like, he is insane. We are so screwed, man. And they refuse to carry it out. So Peter Hegseth is like, well, then you're fired. And then Peter Hegseth orders the new generals to execute this plan. We don't know what happened. We'll never know what happened. But the evidence suggests that this might have been a failed ground invasion. And the Americans have done stupid things like this before, okay? So in 1980, the Americans implemented something called Operation Eagle Claw. And the idea was that at this time, the Iranians had taken hostages, American hostages in Tehran, the American embassy, okay? So Jimmy Carter, the president, authorized a rescue operation. But Iran was too big, so what they did was the American military set up a forward operating base in the desert, halfway between Persian Gulf and Tehran. When they landed in their base, there was a sandstorm, and a lot of their planes malfunctioned. And they recognized that it's really hard to go through such an operation in Iran, so we should just go home. So that was 1980, when Americans were pretty sane. Unfortunately, Americans are no longer sane, okay? This is January 3rd, when the Americans swept into Venezuela and kidnapped their president Maduro, thus ending the conflict between Venezuela and America. This is great TV. The plan worked out perfectly. It showed that Delta Force was invincible. And unfortunately, Donald Trump believes this. And this explains how and why Donald Trump would agree to such an insane plan as to try to build an American military base in the middle of your enemy. So the main message here is that whoever is leading America, whether it's Donald Trump or other people, they believe that optics is all that matters. They think that reality is a movie, a Hollywood movie. So the question then is, why do Americans like this? And unfortunately the answer is because there's too much cooperation between Hollywood and the Pentagon. All right, so this is a movie, Saving Private Ryan, and this was made in the year 1998, okay? Where a private named Ryan, of course, he is lost behind enemy lines in Europe. And his brothers are all killed. So his mother writes a very angry letter to General Marshall and says, all my sons are dead except for one, and he's missing. And so General Marshall is like, we can't have this. We have to win the home front, okay? Europe, this war front, it's secondary to the home front. We need to make sure that the American people are fully behind this war. So he sends a team led by this man, played by Tom Hanks, to go and save Private Ryan. And they do, but at the cost of his life, okay? All right, this has led to the military becoming more of a propaganda machine. Okay, so this is the movie Black Hawk Down. If you saw the movie, then it's about these special forces, Delta Force, that go in and save a pilot when his helicopter was brought down in Somalia, which happened in the late 90s. The problem is that this movie is complete BS. What happened was that the helicopter was brought down and the pilot was taken hostage by the Somalis. But he was treated very well, and eventually he was allowed to go home after the government paid a ransom. But in the movie, what happened was that Delta Force went in and saved the pilot. And this goes back to the mythology of no man left behind. Now, there's a very important scene where a general confronts Delta Force. And what the general says to Delta Force is, you guys are a bunch of cowboys. You guys think you're superior to everyone. You think that we all revolve around you. You guys are ego-driven. All you care about is glory for yourself. And eventually, your ego, your arrogance are going to be your downfall, as well as the downfall of the American military. This is the movie, this is Jessica Lynch. And in 2003, she was serving in the war in Iraq. Her team got lost and they were ambushed by the Iraqis. And then she was kidnapped, but then because she was injured, the Iraqi military sent her to a hospital, a civilian hospital. The people in the hospital treated her very, very well. And they actually tried to send her home in an ambulance. But when the ambulance tried to reach the Americans bombed the ambulance, so the ambulance had to turn back. But the Iraqis informed the Americans where she was, and so told the Americans, you can come and pick her up anytime, okay? The Americans' response organized special forces to go and rescue her, even though she was not in danger. And the media reported that she was raped, she was beaten, held hostage. So that's what the Pentagon does. The Pentagon is a propaganda machine. Pentagon is concerned first and foremost about creating a Hollywood movie out of a war. So this is a huge problem for the American military, for the Pentagon, as they fight this war. You can pull this crap when you're fighting Somalis and Iraqis, but against the Iranians, you need total war. You need to focus on economics, organization, and logistics. Stop doing this crap of optics, okay, and narrative.